Nearly 30 organizations in Western Massachusetts recently received grants from the Massachusetts Cultural Facilities Fund. The money is slated for projects that range from electrical updates at Wistariahurst and Holyoke to improved lobby access at the Amherst Cinema. I spoke with MCC Executive Director Anita about that and more.
For more than 13 years, we have been continuing year after year after year to invest in the cultural infrastructure of the state. That means physical bricks and mortar capital projects, our historic buildings, our theaters, our museums. To date, we are at about $130 million worth of investment. And that bit of state money, which is a big number, has leveraged more than $2.4 billion worth of private investment, created thousands and thousands of jobs in the construction industry. And I'm talking about plumbers, electricians, painters, architects, designers, all associated with these projects, and more than 1,000 permanent jobs that have come into play after our facilities have been rebuilt. We're part of energy conservation when we restore energy systems and put new HVAC in. We kind of laugh at the Mass Cultural Council that we are the HVAC champions of efficient energy systems in our organizations, but we're fixing roofs, we're fixing windows, we're making our organizations accessible. In fact, we in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are really the stewards of the nation's iconic cultural treasures, whether it's historic sites that date back to the beginning of our democracy in this country. People come from all over the world to come to places and buildings that represent what America is. And it's our job to take care of them.
You mentioned HVAC systems, and people might think, oh, snooze, heating, cooling, what's the big deal? But they're incredibly vital to museums and the stewardship of their collections, especially works on paper. So you don't think about something as sort of every day being so valuable, but it truly is.
Well, more than 80% of the projects that we fund, and we're at about 1,000 projects since this program started 13 years ago, more than 80% are what we call, again, not glamorous, deferred maintenance, taking care of the things that are broken and need to be fixed. Anybody who owns a house, it's really fun to do the decorating and put the new amenities, but if the roof leaks, none of that really matters. So it's taking care of the basic infrastructure so that the organizations can thrive and do the programming that we all love.
I think that's a point that more and more people can now understand, Anita, because so many people are at home working on those projects that maybe that deferred maintenance that they've been kind of ignoring or looking away from in recent weeks. When I was looking at the breakdown for these grants for Western Massachusetts in particular, if I counted right, it's almost 30 across Western Massachusetts, and these range from, electrical updates at Wistariahurst, improved lobby access at the Amherst Cinema, on and on. If these organizations, when they apply, what do they need to demonstrate to make sure that they'll receive one?
Well, first of all, the statute is very, very clear about the purpose of this program. It is for cultural organizations. So more than 50% of your programming has to be cultural. It has to have community support. There has to be need, and there has to be a tourism impact. So these need to be organizations that are contributing economically to their communities by attracting visitors. The Cultural Facilities Fund was originally in an economic development bill, and it has proven year after year after year that it is an economic stimulator.
People applied for these a while ago. Back in January, I think the applications were due, and they've recently, in May here, found out that they will be receiving them. But with COVID-19, what if they applied for something that just isn't a priority any longer, given what's going on?
Well, we've had these situations before. You certainly know in the last 13 years, we've had recessions, we've had downturns in the economy. And I have to say, since the inception of this program, 1,000 projects funded, I think there have been a handful, maybe fewer than 5, that have not come to fruition, have not been able to raise the match. Remember, every single dollar the state puts into these projects, the organization has to raise another dollar. And when I say, by the way, that our $130 million has leveraged $2.4 billion, our organizations are way overperforming on the match requirement. So it can be more difficult at these times to raise money to complete these projects. There is a window of time over time, I would say about 4 years to get the whole thing done. There have been situations over the life of this program where something else has become an emergency and an organization needs to maybe switch or adjust the scope of the project. And they can come back to us and we can go to the advisory committee and we can make adjustments and changes. But one thing I think is really important, this funding is critical and it's critical now. First of all, our organizations need to fundraise to make these projects happen. And one of the most powerful pieces of the Cultural Facilities Fund program is the confidence that it gives other people in investing in the projects. So if you have a grant through the Cultural Facilities Fund, you can now take that and show it to other donors, other investors, and say, the state has confidence in our work. We have been fully vetted by a panel. It is a highly competitive program, and we are one of a few who are successful in this program. So you can have confidence in making a donation to the program. That's number one. Number two, remember, this was part of an economic development bill that came into being during recessionary times. It was created to stimulate the economy and to create jobs.
I also noticed in a different grant vein that the Berkshires now has a pool of about $30,000, I believe it was donated, for people who work in the arts that are now finding themselves out of work. What do those people in Berkshire County who might work in the arts industry who need this money need to demonstrate to apply for that grant?
We've done quite a bit of research since we were hit by COVID. In fact, we've done a couple of surveys, both of organizations and of individual cultural workers, teaching artists and the like. Our most recent survey, which actually is about a month old now, found that literally our individual cultural workers have lost more than $16 million of income, thousands of gigs. They're hurting, they're struggling. Remember, cultural workers, whether they're a costume designer that's going to work on a play in the Berkshires, maybe it's a musician who's going to do concerts or play in a local cafe. They came out of the winter, which is lean times. This is the time of year, spring and summer, where they sort of refill the coffers at home. This is their busy, busy season. Well, they came out of winter and hit March, and March was a shutdown. So they have truly, truly been hit hard and are struggling. We issued a COVID relief program a few weeks ago. I'm losing track of time. We talked about that
So
earlier.
we are. Everybody is.
But we were able to put together a pool of funding of about $270,000 so that we could give $1,000 grants to individual cultural workers across the Commonwealth. We were then approached by someone from the Berkshires, a good friend of ours at Shakespeare and Company, who said they were familiar with a philanthropist in New York who wanted to support people in the theater community who were individual workers who were suffering, and asked if we could help distribute the funds. So I want to get this right, GKV Foundation, it's Gary Nisley, whose foundation out of New York donated $30,000, and we are distributing that in Berkshire County. These are his restrictions, to 30 people who work in the theater community, theater arts professionals who have lost income due to the COVID virus. I don't need to tell you, a lot of our cultural organizations, the summer season is a big, big deal in the Berkshires, and that's pretty much shut down. So there will be $30,000 grants, $31,000 grants to theater arts professionals in the Berkshires that we just opened up applications for.
The Berkshires, you touched on it, but we know that the summer season right now is going to look very different than it usually does there, not only from an art and cultural perspective, but from an economic perspective, because so many visitors flock to the Berkshires to go to Tanglewood, to go to Barrington Stage Company, on, and for cultural venues that have either said they're not going to open this season or the season is just massively going to be different. For you, as someone who's a champion of the arts, who loves the arts, what does it mean to you to see these changes taking place?
Well, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that there's a sense of loss. There's a sense of loss from people like me who are not artists, but look forward to the summer to come out to the Berkshires to be renewed and refreshed and experiencing all the amazing dance and music and visual arts and historic sites that you have in the Berkshires. And so there is a real sense of loss to not be able to participate in that. There's a sense of loss and actual grieving on the part of our cultural organizations in the Berkshires they planned years in advance of each summer season, of what productions they're going to put together, of what presentations and exhibitions that they're going to put on display for our visitors from all over the world, quite frankly, who go to the Berkshires. And if that's not going to happen, they feel a terrible sense of loss. By the way, on top of losing their income and their jobs, in many cases, we've seen hundreds of layoffs in the Berkshires, and furloughs due to the COVID virus. So there's a really a great deal of sadness and loss, and I think we have to acknowledge that there's an emotional impact on the situation, not just in the Berkshires, all over Massachusetts and all over the country. But I'm a lemonade person, and I'm always looking at, oh, I'm so in awe and amazed at what our organizations are doing, because they can't not dance, they can't not make music, they can't not make art. They have to continue to follow their passion, which is serving the community through the arts and culture, and they're finding a way. They're finding a way at Williamstown Theater Festival by putting one of their productions on Audible. They're not being compensated for it. So unfortunately, the business model around a lot of this work is really not helping our organizations, but they can't fail to produce what they're meant to produce. We're seeing organizations thinking about taking productions outside because they think they might be able to come back online out of doors more quickly and more safely than they can by being confined inside of a theater space. Everybody's exploring different ways to make sure that if and when they are able to provide the cultural enrichment and productions that they are here to make for all of us, that they can do it safely for their audiences and safely for their staff members.